24 hours before the bank went under, said everything's under control. This is all regulatory business. It's just going through a flux right now. We'll have it solved by tomorrow. What happened on the morrow? They wrote themselves gigantic bonuses and sunk the ship. Main topic.
Main topic for the week. We are talking the bank collapse going on in the United States, but it's having ripple effects now to other parts of the world, with Credit Suisse recently saying that they need a few $100 billion because they're facing a liquidity crisis. This happened, I want to say it got started last Friday, the Friday before St. Patrick's Day 2023, when the Silicon Valley Bank went under within a matter of hours. I think it was like 36 hours from the point that the good old-fashioned bank run started until they were completely out of assets to satisfy customer demands for their deposits. There's a lot to get into the weeds about how this happened and all this kind of stuff. You're going to hear, if you haven't already, from the mainstream sources that this is all of deregulation, right? The same thing they said in 2008, as if the 100+ regulatory bodies at the state and federal level that were existing pre-2008 weren't quite enough. Tom Woods makes this point all the time. So if there were something like 110 different regulatory bodies at the state and federal level regulating the financial system, that only if we had that 111th agency, that would have fixed it. Right?
Well,
110 wasn't enough.
It's the same thing they do.
111 would have been perfect.
Every time they fuck up, they're like, if we just would have had more money, we wouldn't have spent so much money.
That's
like, what? If we would have had more money, we would have lowered the deficit. Are you sure? Okay. Seems counterintuitive, but I'll give you the keys to the car, 3-year-old. You go ahead.
You've had a lot of money for a long time, and look where we are.
And then you show back up a year later, and you're like, so that deficit, huh? It's like, it's tricky. It's a tricky thing.
Yeah.
All we need is a little more money. So you're going to have to pay us more, okay? And by the way, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. So,
yeah.
Again, I don't know how many times we have to beat ourselves over the head with the same hammer that more government, more regulation leads to worse outcomes. Just look at Palestine?
East Palestine.
Yeah, East Palestine, yeah. That was regulated by the government. When was the last time that they were health and safety checked? Or
it had been a hot minute.
Since about World War I. Just roundabout then. So you might, when something weighs 50,000 trillion tons,
yeah,
and is traveling at a speed of Mach Schnell across the world or across the states with, I don't know, just about the worst fucking shit you could possibly have, refuse, chemicals, and all that good stuff. Maybe you should check the tires every now and again.
And to David's point about sorry, we screwed up with all the money you gave us. Just give us more money and we'll fix it this time. I don't know if this originated from him. This is the first place I saw it, so I want to give credit where it's due. Spike Cohen said something to the effect of, all of the people that were telling you literally minutes before Silicon Valley Bank, and I'm going to call it SVB for short, moving forward for this episode.
Kind of like SBF.
Is all the people that were telling you not 5 minutes before it collapsed that everything's under control because they have control are the same people that are going to tell you now that everything went ass-shaped because they didn't have enough control, right? And that's exactly what they're doing. Every single article that you read at least mentions the fact that, there was a Trump-era deregulation in 2018 that, repealed this certain aspect of the Dodd-Frank bill that was passed after the 2008 collapse, and that repeal of that one regulation, that's what caused this entire thing to explode. if you have to suspend credulity to believe that not only did that one regulation impact everything, especially when you consider the size and scope of the Dodd-Frank Act, which eventually went into law, that they just narrowly carved out this one thing and that within a couple years that causes an entire collapse, I don't know what to tell you. Get a lobotomy. Because if that simplistic of an explanation is all it takes to convince you that, yep, government doesn't have enough power, I think it needs a little bit more, then you need way more help than this podcast can possibly provide to you. And I know, I'm not talking to our viewers and listeners. Again, that self-selected group is much smarter than that, but your friend, your family, anytime you come across these articles, your ears should immediately perk up that you're being fed a line of bullshit.
Of course, we'll question the sources too.
Right. But so with SVB in particular, the kind of nuts and bolts of the situation, and it gets into where we really want to focus. We're just going to throw out the fact that there is that argument that deregulation caused it. But really what this is a systemic failure in a system that is government monopoly controlled, starting with the Federal Reserve. And we'll tie that nice little bow here at the end. But what happened to SVB in particular is a few years ago, with about $200 billion of capital, they purchased U.S. Treasury bonds because they wanted to have that money at least making money while they were keeping it on their balance sheets. And if you'll remember a few years ago, pre-COVID, before the Fed had to start really ratcheting up interest rates to get inflation under control, the interest rate, the federal funds rate, was super low. So when you bought government bonds at that rate, you were only going to get a certain amount of interest gain on those government bonds. Well, fast forward, COVID, inflation. The Fed now starts to have jack up interest rates to combat inflation. And that basically made SVB's bonds worthless because SVB had these bonds, say, at 1.87% when they purchased them. And now the federal funds rate is north of 4-5% now. So when they go try to sell these bonds back, when they need to get the capital to pay their deposits who are demanding their money, the rightful owners of that money, the people that put it in the bank in the first place, they have to sell their bonds for pennies on the dollar. So that $200 billion that SVB didn't correctly risk manage was basically worthless. And so what you had is an old-fashioned bank run. The first customer realizes that something's screwed up. He says, I want my money back. SVB says, okay, here you go. But then customer 2, then 22, then 2002, then 20,002. I don't know how many customers they had, but you get the point. The more the run happens, eventually SVB runs out of liquidity. They can't give the people the money that they deposited. And so what did the government do to a government-created problem? They bailed out all the malactors, the people engaged in all of the malfeasance. Because don't you know that when sophisticated, suit and tie banksters screw up, we got to bail them out. But when the American people get in a bind, often because of government action, screw you.
And I know what
Give
you're
us
thinking.
more money, taxpayer, but don't commit suicide.
And I know what you're thinking. Dane, David, this isn't 2008. But it is. Again, we saw the warning signs back then, led to one of the biggest economic catastrophes of our generation. And who got saved again? Too big to fail. Save the banks. CEOs got bonuses. Oh, fun fact, true to the SVB guys before the bank went under. You know what they did? Wrote themselves gigantic bonuses right before it went under.
Yeah.
Fun. So the same people that said that we could have done this better, but we just needed to regulate it more. To go back to Dane's point, and I'm like, maybe don't call him stupid. Maybe don't just try to save him. Try to be nice to him, kill him with kindness. No, if they truly believe that all that is needed is more government regulation in a bank, after we've seen, well, we don't even know how this is going to play out. We're still in that little teeter totter of well, that bank went down, and then another bank went down. Are they all going to go down? We don't know. So right now we're in the middle of it. We'll see how it pans out. But these are the same people, like Dane said, 24 hours before the bank went under, said everything's under control. This is all regulatory business. It's just going through a flux right now. We'll have it solved by tomorrow. What happened on the morrow? They wrote themselves gigantic bonuses and sunk the ship, pulled the lever. And these are the people that let this happen with their oversight are the same people that we trust to tell us if a nuclear missile is coming our way. We trust them with the launch codes to our nuclear arsenal. We trust them to tell us the truth. You think they're going to tell us any sniff of the truth if an ICBM is coming our way? They can't even tell us if this fucking one bank is going to go down or not. Sorry, Fulkin. I don't know how many times can you be beat over the head before you start like questioning things and pushing back a little bit and, not just mindlessly walking off the cliff with the rest of the lemmings. I don't know.
See, and here's the other thing that if it doesn't piss you off, you should definitely be asking why these people continue to think that they can insult your intelligence and get away with it. And what I mean by these people is, I mean the people who claim...
Please, be definitive.
The people who claim, right, lack of regulation is the reason why this happened and blah, blah, blah. Because, they'll say, well, this is just, once again, the free market run amok, despite the fact that the financial system, other than I think like healthcare and maybe energy, but maybe not even more than energy, but I think not as much as healthcare. The financial sector is the most heavily regulated sector in the entire economy, right? So this idea that there's not enough regulation is just patently absurd. But in addition to that, right, they gaslight the living shit out of you by saying, well, they repealed one regulation, that's why this happened. But this entire system is a government orchestrated monopoly, right? The government, elected politicians appoint the Fed board. They're confirmed by the Senate. They get monopoly control of the issue of money with legal tender laws. You're not allowed to, you're not allowed to refuse to accept payment in debts in anything other than U.S. dollars. So they force you to use dollars, right? So this is a government-created system through and through. And then the government passes regulations, and then the government repeals one tiny little sliver of a regulation, and then they say, this is the free market run amok because our government-created system that has monopoly control of money, that has a put based on the whole system that bails it all out with, just rampant inflation by pumping money in the system when shit goes ass-shaped. That system is allegedly the free market.
And by the way,
there's nothing remotely free market about this situation from start to finish. And again, it is the height of gaslighting and insulting your intelligence to suggest otherwise. Yet that's exactly what they want you to believe.
And by the way, if it was such a chaotic market that was so unpredictable, why are so many members of Congress and the Senate and
making money hand over fist,
outperforming every goddamn hedge fund that there is? If it was that crazy, how is that possible?
Yeah.
So again, I'm pushing the bullshit button.
I mean, ask yourself, you've seen these people talk on TV. Do they really seem bright enough to tie their own shoes, let alone to, outpredict the market as consistently and as magnificently as they do? I mean, come on. Who are you going to believe? Them or your own eyeballs? But not only that.
I wouldn't trust them to park my car because they'd end up selling it and be like, I don't know what happened. Anyway, I'll see you later. Bye.
Not only that, but the solution to the problem, right? So what did the Federal Reserve do? What did the government with the Federal Reserve help? What did they do? They bailed them out. And how did they do that? Well, if you remember, dating back to April of 2022, when the Fed started tightening because inflation was out of control, in addition to raising rates, what did they do? They had to lower the balance sheet. What that means is the Fed holds assets on their balance sheet. And when they hold tons of assets on their balance sheet, they're artificially keeping the money supply artificially inflated because they're holding the assets on their balance sheet and they're pumping that money into the economy. So right around April 2022, I forget what the Fed balance sheet stood at, but I can tell you the exact number. From April 2022 until the SVB collapse, the Fed had decreased its balance sheet by $626 billion. What that means is they had essentially pulled $626 billion worth of liquidity out of the market, right? And that was how they were trying to, get a hold of inflation. What did they do after SVB collapsed? Within 1 week, from April 22 to now, so almost an entire year of decreasing their balance sheet, what did they do in 1 week? They put 50% of that right back up on the balance sheet. They put about $290 some odd billion back on the Fed balance sheet, which is pumping money back into the market. So he said, whoops, we pumped too much in. We're going to start gradually taking it out over the course of a year. Oh shit, things went ass-shaped. Let's put half of that back in the period of 1 week. These are the geniuses that are running your life. These are the geniuses that when you go to your employer and you say, employer, I'm going to agree to work for you and trade hours of my life for dollars. What do you say? Employer says, yes. Handshake, you go to work, employer cuts you a check, everybody's happy. A third party, government, steps into the middle of that and says, psych, what you thought you were trading the hours of your life for in terms of dollars doesn't purchase as much as you thought because we just pumped a bunch of money in the economy. By any other definition, that's theft. It's implicit theft. They're not literally pulling the dollars out of your wallet, but it is theft because your $3 used to buy a carton of eggs. Now it can't buy 2 eggs. And this is the system that they have created for you. This is the system that allows them to steal with you, not only explicitly in the terms of taxes, but implicitly in terms of inflation. These are the people that are running your life. And every time somebody in their small group screws up, they get a bailout on your dime.
Do you get a bailout, by the way? Do you get a nice little fat stack of cash? Like
I'm
COVID?
lucky to get a sliver back in terms of a tax return of what they stole from me over the period of the last year for an interest-free loan. That's all I get.
It's I don't like that trade-off.
I know. Doesn't seem fair, does it?
Doesn't seem fair at all, to be honest with you.